Welcome everyone to this session on support available to survivors of sexual abuse and assault during lockdown. My name's Emily, I'm a solicitor at Burdon, Kemp, and I'm also privileged to be a trustee of Survivors UK. Survivors UK is an absolutely fantastic charity working to support male survivors of sexual abuse and assault. I'm really pleased to be here today with Sam, who is Survivors UK's Outreach and Engagement Officer, and Martyna, who is Survivors UK's ISVA Manager. And we've also got myself and my colleague Rebecca from Burdon Kemp. I'm going to hand straight over to Sam and Martyna, who are going to talk about the support that Survivors UK offers.
Thank you so much, Emily. Bear with me, guys, while I just share our presentation. Would one of the panelists just be able to let me know if you can see that? Can you see the screen, anyone? So there's a chat. We can see, thank you very much. So as Emily just said, I'm Sam Thomson, the Outreach and Engagement Officer. And Martyna, would you just like to say your name and who you are as well?
Hi there, my name is Martyna and I'm the ISVA coordinator, and ISVA is one of the many services that we provide at Survivors UK, and we'll talk a bit more about each and one of them.
Thank you very much. So yes, it goes without saying that we are incredibly grateful to Burdon Kemp for letting us be here today to speak about our service. And in fact, especially today, it's International Men's Day on the 19th of November each year. And I'm going to explain a little bit about what that day means, as there's a little bit of confusion sometimes around what it is. And I'll go through that on the next slide. But today, just sort of as an introduction before we begin, today we're going to be speaking about what Survivors UK can do right now during lockdown, during coronavirus times, when obviously there's a lot of anxiety around, and we want to make sure that we are extending as much support and as much help within our means to survivors of sexual violence. Survivors UK is an inclusive sexual violence charity. We support men, boys, non-binary and transgender people who have experienced sexual violence. And we will always try to endeavour to support anyone of any gender if they are able to come to our service, whether that's signposting or supporting ourselves, supporting you ourselves. We're going to go into our services in a little bit, but today this is going to be quite an intense topic. Some people who are here today might have lived experiences, some people might not, and either way, sometimes engaging with this topic, we might think that we're ready to listen to it, ready to talk about it, but myself included, and probably some of our panelists as well, sometimes we're just not ready to speak about it today, or just not ready to listen to it. And that's okay, we are only human. If at any point you do want to leave this talk for your own safety, just to make sure that you've got some space from the topic and space for yourself, please, I encourage that you do. Just on that though, on the bottom right-hand corner, help@survivorsuk.org and isva@survivorsuk.org. If anything is brought up for you from this talk today, I really encourage that you get in touch with one of those emails. So what is International Men's Day? Well, number one, it is on the 19th of November each year, so today, so that's what makes it so important that you've all come here today. The first tenet of the day is making a positive difference to the well-being and lives of men and boys. It's about raising awareness for charities supporting men and boys and their well-being, and promoting a positive conversation about men, manhood, and masculinity. And I'd like to hone in on that last point, especially right now. Promoting that positive conversation, that is something that we want to do today. We want to make sure that we are promoting support services, and we are showing people that it is okay to reach out for support, irrespective of your gender, irrespective of age, irrespective of any demographic information. Without further ado, I'd like to go through some of the services that we offer at Survivors UK, and I'll talk about how they might be flexibly working throughout coronavirus times or COVID-19. Number one, the support that we offer is our helpline or our online helpline and emotional chat service. This operates over multiple different platforms. So this operates over web chat, over text or SMS, WhatsApp, email, and even letter, if that is a platform that you would find comfortable. We do say that unfortunately we can't offer telephone helplines just due to funding, and also right now it is virtually impossible as we are all remotely working. I'm part of the emotional support worker team or the helpline team, and usually this will always take place over our chat services. This is always a trained helpline that you will be speaking with. I've been through the training process. It is incredibly rigorous. We need to make sure that we are in a safe space with a person, with a client. This chat is always going to be under your control or the client's control. We will never force someone to speak out something that they're not ready to speak about. From my own experiences being on the helpline, it is usually about what is just going on right now. A lot of things in our lives right now, especially with COVID-19, it is a time of anxiety, it is a time of uncertainty, and a lot of us feel quite isolated. And that is usually what people want to speak about, and that's what that service is there for. It's also generally the first step for talking, whether that's talking about the topic in general or communicating with our service. And I would also like to stress that this isn't just a service for survivors themselves. We recognise that we need to support the supporters. This is a service for allies, loved ones, and professionals supporting survivors themselves. Sometimes we need a space to reflect, to debunk. Sometimes we need a space to just ask for help, and that's okay. This is a 7-day service, Monday to Sunday from 12 till 8 p.m. And these chats are usually around 45 minutes long. And on the screen now, there's just some information on how to get in touch with our helpline. So that's our WhatsApp number, which you can text, our email, as mentioned on the first slide, and that is our website, which you can find information about our helpline on. Next is we have counselling. Now, before COVID-19, this would always be face-to-face, but unfortunately now we don't have the luxury of meeting people face-to-face. But we want to be as close as possible, so we are making sure that we operate over Zoom, which is what you're all here today on, unless you're watching the recording. So number one, with our face-to-face counselling, this is one-to-one counselling, which will start with a self-referral, which is what we always encourage, which you can find on our website, or you can email us, which information will be given out at the end of this. And what we say is this will always start with a chat, or in clinical language, an assessment. We want to make sure that this service is appropriate for you and vice versa. We want to make sure that you are benefiting from speaking with us through counselling. This is going to be 12 weekly sessions, again, operating over Zoom, and they usually take about an hour long. And there is an opportunity to extend after that, up to 48 weeks, with the average being around 27 weeks when a client feels that they want to leave the service. We are empowerment-based and trauma-informed, and to sort of demystify what that means, to be empowerment-based is about giving someone the tools that they want for their own life to be fulfilling. We never want to tell someone, this is how you should live your life, this is what's safe. We want to make sure that we are giving them the tools for their own life. Be trauma-informed is how we interact with the client. We want to make sure that we are present in the room. We want to make sure that we aren't just sitting there taking notes. We want to make sure that we are listening, to show that we are there to support them as a person. Our group work, hinted in the name, is groups of survivors coming together to share an experience, to share what they might be struggling with, to share their coping strategies. As I mentioned, sexual violence can be quite an isolating thing, or an incredibly isolating thing. To know that you can come together with groups of people who may have had a similar experience can be incredibly empowering. We want to create that peer support for people. After the 12 sessions of group work, we have the ongoing group. So after people have finished with the group work, they can come back to our service. At the end of every month, we host this ongoing group, so you can get back in touch potentially with those people you went through the group work process with, as well as the group work facilitators and counsellors that you might have met along the way. We also have specialist group work schemes, and this is for people who might benefit from being in a group with people who are similar to them, who might interact with the world slightly differently. So 3 groups that we currently offer, but we will never say to someone this is the only group that you can go in if you do belong to part of these groups, is the transgender group. So this we recognise as a massive umbrella term for transgender and non-binary people, as you can see on the bottom of this slide. We have one for children and young people, so from the ages of 13 to 19. And this would be a good opportunity to say that 13 is the youngest age of people that we will support or can support. And we have a group for people who are part of the BAME community. And here is the counselling referral pathway. So if you were interested in looking through the referral pathway to Survivors UK, this would be a really good place to start. If going to our website might be too much and you just don't want to type that into Google, that's okay. This this document right here, it has a hyperlink to our online referral form for our counselling. If you did want to look through what we would ask on that referral form in your own time, I really do encourage it. I'm now going to pass over to Martyna, who's going to explain a little bit about our independent sexual violence advisors.
Hello everyone. ISVA service is one of the many services that we provide at Survivors UK. ISVA service focuses mainly on the criminal justice process, and what we do is that when we work with survivors, we provide them with emotional and practical support going through that criminal justice process. People can get in touch with us even if they haven't reported to the police, but if that is something that they maybe are considering, then we're more than happy to provide them with all the information about the reporting process and also the process itself. How would that look like? What are the different stages? What are the different outcomes at each stage? And also what is the available support at each stage of the process? And we do that so that people can make an informed decision whether they want to report the abuse that they went through to the police. If they decide that they want to report, ISVAs can help them in making that report either on their behalf or giving them options of how they may be able to report. If someone decides that maybe at this stage they're not ready to report to the police, that is fine. We wouldn't be telling people, we think you should report or not. We would absolutely leave that choice to the survivor. And at that point, our involvement in supporting the survivor would end. If at any point in the future they would decide that at that point in life and stage they're ready to report, they're more than welcome to get back in touch with us, and we can pick up from there. We provide information and advice around the criminal justice process. So once someone is going through that process and they want to know, what's going to happen next, what's the next stage, what should I expect, and so on. This is something that the ISVA can inform them on. Just a little bit of background, the ISVA role was created by the Home Office because what they saw is that the police didn't have the capacity to carry out investigations and also look after the victim and the survivor and answer all these questions that are burning questions, and just to ease people anxiety around the process. What we would do is that mainly we would advocate and liaise with professionals involved in supporting that person. So it would be mainly the police if there is anything that survivor wants to raise with the police about their case, or they're not quite sure about what's going on with their case. This is something that we can do with their consent. If there is anything else that we can do to support the survivor, so for example, speaking to a school, college, employer, if that part of their life has been affected by what's going on, we're more than happy to speak to them on their behalf, to explain their current situation and see if there is anything that either school, college, university or employer can put in place to support that person going forward. If there's anything that we feel we are unable to support survivor around simply because it's outside of our remit, we'll find a suitable service and specialist service that can support them around that area. And that could be issues around drugs and alcohol, housing support, benefit support, immigration, and so on. People can self-refer to our service. Most of our referrals come from either the police or perhaps health services and so on. But if you want to reach out to us, like Sam said, on this slide, there is a hyperlink to go into our referral form. And usually what we do is once we receive the referral form, we aim to contact people within five days just to kind of say hello and arrange for initial assessment. So the initial chat that also Sam mentioned, it would look a bit different than the counselling assessment. And what we would do is that the questions that we're asking, it's a lot about your current circumstances in life And the reason why we're asking these questions is because we want to assess what your needs may be and what we'll be able to support you around. And there's always an option, if there is any questions that people do not want to answer or don't feel comfortable, it's absolutely fine to let us know. We can skip those.
Okay, thank you so much, Martyna.
Thank you.
So as Martyna just sort of mentioned around wait times on getting in contact with our services, for the helpline, isn't on the slide, sorry, but there is no wait time. If unfortunately there is someone currently on the chat, you might need to wait around 45 minutes or longer if there are more people in the queue. But currently, in again my own experience of being on the helpline, there is rarely a queue or rarely a wait time. For the ISVA service, as Martyna mentioned, it is around 5 days. For our counselling for the assessment for children and young people, it is around 5 days, what we would deem under the age of 18, and then it is around a month, or it might be longer just due to COVID-19. For counselling to actually begin from the assessment stage to starting counselling, for children and young people, it is no wait time. For adults, it is around 10 months. And we do recognise that that is an incredibly long time to wait to receive counselling or to go through counselling. So on the next slide, I'm going to go through a little bit about the flexible services that we do offer to help with that. And for group work, for the assessment stage, there is no wait time again for children and young people. For adults, it is around 2 months currently. And for group work, to begin group work, for children and young people, no wait time. And for adults, it is around 4 months for the next group to begin. So I just mentioned, wait times can be a massive barrier for coming to this service, and we want to make sure that we are being as flexible and as dynamic as possible to support as many people as we can, because obviously we know that it is difficult, and we want to make sure that we recognise that, and we want to make sure that people aren't feeling abandoned after speaking about something so important. So there are multiple different things that we are offering. So the second Sunday of every month, as soon as you refer to the service and you're on the wait list, you can come to something which we call the Client Hangout, which on the second Sunday of every month, you're welcome to come to a social space for 2 hours to meet with fellow people who might be on the wait list or might be currently receiving support from SurvivorsUK, to speak about things ranging from social get-togethers to well-being to COVID-19 to other services. After this, we have the service user panel. We want to make sure that you are empowered to feedback to our service. We want to make sure that this is a service built by you and can improve through you. Unfortunately, this year we weren't able to do the Wellbeing Day, but next year, 2021, hopefully when we're all back outside, we will start this off again. This is a day dedicated to workshops around mindfulness, around trauma-informed yoga, around how Lego can improve well-being. It's a day to gain these skills and be more informed about trauma. For workshops, we also offer these on the second Sunday of every month. This is all about knowing more about trauma, knowing more about what you might have experienced, to give you these tools and the knowledge and the theory behind trauma. And also we offer creative writing intermittently to express yourself artistically with trauma. And finally, and this is the final slide, so thank you for bearing with us, is the outreach and engagement role, which is my role. And we've had this role since 2018, and we realised and we recognised that our service was brilliant, and maybe I'm biased saying that, but I think it's brilliant. But we did recognise that people either weren't aware of SurvivorsUK, or they were, and there were some myths around what we do, who we support, how we can support. So we recognised since 2018 that we need to start reaching out to people, engaging organisations, institutions and individuals with SurvivorsUK, but specifically not just organisations that already speak about this topic. It's something that affects everyone, and we need to make sure that everyone knows about this topic and knows about our service. And a great way to do that is increasing awareness and educating around rape and sexual abuse and sexual assault for men, boys, non-binary and transgender people. So how are we doing? So since 2019, so the start of last year, these are all of the places that I've been lucky enough to deliver a very similar talk to what I'm delivering right here today. And now we get to add you. Thank you very much, guys, for listening to myself and Martyna and myself. And I really hope that it was interesting for you. On the bottom, you can just see my email, and I'm really happy if you wanted to get in touch about anything that you might have been brought up today, whether that's personally or you've noticed a typo or whatnot. And the ISVA email is just at the bottom as well if you wanted to get more information around the ISVA scheme at Survivors UK. So now I'm going to pass over to Emily and Rebecca, and I'm really sorry, I think I might have gone over my 10-minute allowance, so I will quickly leave.
Not at all. That was really interesting, and I always love to hear the range of support that Survivors UK is offering to all of its clients. So thanks so much to you both, really appreciated. Rebecca and I are going to be covering the legal side of the support that's available to survivors this afternoon. We also have a PowerPoint, so there will be a few more slides, but hopefully it will just give you a bit of a flavour of how civil cases run, where they kind of come in the process of recovery, and just a really quick touch on how lockdown has changed things, but also how things are still happening within legal cases. So as I said at the beginning, my name's Emily and I'm a solicitor at Burdon, Kemp. My colleague Rebecca has joined me today, and she's a partner in our team. We both specialise in bringing claims, civil claims relating to abuse. This is the only type of work that we do.
Thanks, Emily.
Rebecca's just, yeah.
Yeah, so as Emily explained, we act for survivors and abuse in claims for compensation at Burdon Kemp, or BBK as we like to call it. We have the largest team of specialist abuse solicitors in the country. There are 16 of us, and this is solely the only work that we do in the department, acting for survivors only. In terms of lockdown, as far as we're able to do so, it is very much business as usual. We might not be able to be in the office to see each other at the moment or to see our clients directly, but every client from start to finish does have direct access to their solicitors. So from the very initial inquiry right up until the end of the case, every solicitor has a mobile number, so we are always contactable directly. As I said, might not be able to see our clients face to face at the moment, but it's very much Zoom meetings, team meetings, video calls, however our clients would prefer to communicate. And we also have an out of hours service, so we can be reached in evenings or at the weekends, because we appreciate everyone has different schedules and commitments. So it really is just being flexible to accommodate our clients as to when they're available to speak with us. And finally, we have male and female solicitors in the department, which I think is important just to state, because it's obviously a choice of an individual client as to who they'd feel more comfortable working with.
So just really to give a bit of an idea of where we come in the process when you would speak to a solicitor. So as Martyna has explained, ISVAs are there to help support through the criminal court process, which is where someone has charges brought against them, there's a police investigation, the CPS are involved, and it's a criminal court judge who would make a decision, if it gets to a final hearing, about whether someone's guilty or not guilty. Now, we come after that, bringing civil claims, and that's for a couple of reasons, which we'll talk about a bit later on. But fundamentally, the work that we do is a civil claim for compensation. It's brought under personal injury, and it's for abuse and assaults that people have suffered either in childhood or in adulthood.
Claim, as Emily said, they are predominantly claims for compensation, but I think it's really important to discuss with a client at the outset what it is that they're hoping to achieve by this process, because I think that justice very much looks different to different individuals, so it's important to ascertain what our clients are actually hoping to achieve, and then just to bear that in mind and work together to achieve that throughout the claim. Another added option is that potentially there's the option of receiving an apology. Now, different clients feel different ways about this. Some people would prefer an apology, other people aren't really particularly that interested, particularly if it comes from perhaps an institution as opposed to the person that's actually abused them. At the moment, when you bring a legal claim, it is for compensation, so there is no legal right to an apology, but at BBK we very much campaign for that to be given to the clients if they would like one. I think an important aspect of bringing a claim is in relation to the outcomes and things that you can then do with the compensation once the case is over. And that's very much looking at private therapy for clients. And I think that's important because it then gives clients the flexibility to not only have, as it were, that pot of money to dip in and out of as and when they need therapy, but also to have the flexibility and have the choice of somebody that they want to work with, which can of course be done when they'll be paying with the compensation. I think another important thing is that it can sometimes be seen as an acknowledgement of what's happened, and of course being believed if a defendant pays out in a successful claim, which of course is very important. And it's also very much a client-led process, which I think is different to the criminal process. Reason being, and I'm sure Martyna can say more about this as she's already done, but I imagine that it's pretty much a case of waiting for the police and waiting for the CPS and sort of waiting for those updates to come to you. But in terms of bringing a claim for compensation, it's very much led by our clients from the start and throughout the whole process. We are there to advise our clients, and really the clients are involved from the outset on every single step because it is their claim. And potentially these claims for compensation can be life-changing. I mean, I think it's important to say that no amount of money is unfortunately going to change what's happened in the past. But again, with the ability to, for example, pay for the private treatment, compensation can really be used to help improve the lives of survivors.
So in terms of who the defendants are, who we bring claims against, it is possible to bring a claim against an individual. Now, it is only worth doing that if they have sufficient assets. So we would look to get an asset report in advance of bringing a claim against an individual. Alternatively, most of our claims are brought against organisations. And that can be organisations who are responsible for the acts of their employees or volunteers. And these organisations are likely to have insurance, and therefore it's likely that they will be good defendants who will be able to pay compensation at the end of a claim. And there's just some examples on here of organisations that we act against or in relation to current clients. So for example, the Scout Association for Scoutmasters, and many different religious organisations, as well as local authorities for school teachers or youth workers, and children's homes. So quite a large range there. There are time limits that attach to civil claims for compensation. Now, these are 3 years from the date of the incident, or if it happens when you're a child, those 3 years start when you become an adult, so when you turn 18. Now, that effectively means that you have until your 21st birthday to bring the claim for compensation. But the court can still allow you to bring your claim, the civil court can, and it will look at a number of things when it decides whether to allow you. Now, that includes what the reasons are for the delay, and the courts do understand that particularly for sexual abuse, it is very difficult for survivors to come forward and to talk about it. And I know that Survivors UK has done some research on how many years it actually takes for male survivors of abuse to come forward just to talk about it for the first time. So the court does acknowledge that it is really hard to speak about things having happened to you. The court will also consider whether a fair trial is still possible. And it's just really important to note that time continues to count even during lockdown, but it continues to kind of tick away. So if you have any queries or you think that you might be thinking about a civil compensation claim, it's just really important that you get advice as quickly as possible from a solicitor, because it may be that there are things that solicitors can do to try to protect your position. It's just really important that you take the advice to see what your options might be.
So the process of bringing a claim in a nutshell, I'll try and keep this quick. Just sort of Picking up on the impact of lockdown, as I've said before, as far as we're able to do so, it's very much business as usual at BBK. We're all working at home and are completely contactable as usual by our clients. One of the aspects we were a little bit worried about at the start of lockdown is really the impact on the courts, as we were worried that it was going to take some time for the old courts to get used to working at home, but I'm pleased to say I've attended a number of virtual hearings with judges in their homes, and they're all going very well. So actually, I'm quite pleased. It doesn't appear to have delayed things that much, which is great. The first thing that we really do when we bring a claim is that we obtain a client's police and court documents, and the reason we do this is because for a client to call us up over the telephone and speak to a complete stranger about sensitive, difficult details, it can be re-traumatizing, particularly speaking to a complete stranger. They've never met us and often they don't know what we look like. So the reason we get the police records is so that we can ascertain what's happened without having to ask our clients too many difficult questions. And what we then do with that information is we pop that into what's called a letter before claim. And the idea is just to include as much information as possible of the allegations that are being made so that the defendant can investigate. And what we then do, which is important, is to try to obtain as many records as we can for our clients, which includes medical, educational, employment, counselling records if there are any. And the idea is for us to try and piece together as much information as we can about our clients' lives to see how they potentially could have been impacted over their lives by what's happened to them. The next steps, once we've got all of those records, is to instruct one of our expert psychiatrists to meet with our clients. Again, during lockdown, these are still able to go ahead virtually, which I'm pleased, so it hasn't caused any delay. But the idea is for our experts to prepare a report for us that we can then use as a way of valuing the claims. So, for example, the experts will be asked to look at things such as whether a client might have suffered any mental health difficulties as a result of the abuse, any prognosis terms, and also whether, well, the type, the duration and the cost of any therapy that might be required, should a client wish to take that up. Once we've got that expert evidence, the next step would be to try and negotiate with the defendant. And I would point out here that it's really important before you enter that negotiation process to have your expert evidence ready. There's a real risk that clients can undersettle their claims without having that medical report. So I really would not recommend that would be done. But once you've got that report, as I said, you can enter into negotiation. And if for some reason the defendant isn't playing ball, or we don't believe that our clients are being offered enough compensation, then we will proceed to the court process. So we will issue proceedings at court and we will take the cases to trial if, as I said, we don't believe that our clients are being offered enough compensation. We've done that many times. We've taken a lot of cases to trial over the years and been successful, including earlier this year. We took a case to the Court of Appeal and one of our clients was awarded over £1 million in compensation, which is the highest amount of damages that's been awarded for an abuse survivor to date. And I've just finished here on the therapy point. It really is up to individual clients as to whether they would like to have therapy during the process of their civil claim being brought. It's a personal choice. If a client would prefer to have therapy at the end of the case, then of course that's fine. But if a client says that they would actually like some help during the process, then we will absolutely arrange that for them.
So as Rebecca's just touched upon, in terms of the compensation and how it's worked out and what can actually be awarded, there's two types of compensation. So the first is for the pain and suffering of what actually happened. Now that's for the incident or incidents themselves, but also any psychiatric harm that's happened as a result of those incidents. And as Rebecca just mentioned, that's why we would get psychiatric evidence within a claim so that we can ensure that that's proven either to the defendant or to the court. The second type of compensation is for any financial losses that have arisen as a result of the abuse. Again, the psychiatric report would provide support for that, but we would also look to see whether any other expert evidence was needed in order for us to be able to prove that within a claim. And there's just some examples here of things that we at BBK have claimed for within our clients' claims, and that can include things like camouflage makeup for if someone has self-harm scars, things like loss of earnings, which can be either for past losses or for future losses. If it's going to take you a bit of time to get back on your feet and able to succeed at work in the way that you used to be able to, we can claim for the difference in lost earnings as a result of that. So just a bit of an idea there of different things that we can claim for within a civil compensation claim. And Rebecca's just going to mention an alternative approach to civil claims.
Yeah, so this is another avenue, and that's the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority, or in short CICA or SICA. And this is a government-run scheme. It provides compensation to victims of violent crime, which includes sexual abuse. And sometimes the CICA is really the only option for clients, and that might be perhaps because an abuser has died, or they might not have sufficient assets with which to pay our clients compensation, or we're not able for some reason to bring a claim against an institution which would have that insurance policy. So on those occasions, the advice is to make an application to the CICA. They can award up to a maximum of £500,000, but the CICA awards do tend to generally be a lot smaller than the outcomes that can be reached during a civil claim. And then there are strict deadlines for the CICA, so this part's quite important. The deadlines are that you have 2 years from the date of the incident, or from reaching majority if it happened as a child, so at the age of 20, or within 2 years of reporting it to the police if it happened as an adult. That's quite important because obviously, as we've spoken about, survivors sometimes don't come forward for many, many years for various different reasons. And of course, once they do, police investigations can take over the 2 year period. So unfortunately, if the CICA is able to raise that defence of you've missed the deadline, then they will. There is, however, a discretion that the CICA will accept applications out of time, but that's only if exceptional circumstances prevented the applicant from reporting earlier, and if the CICA can process that application without making extensive further inquiries, which essentially means that they don't have to do too much work themselves. But that's, of course, what we're here for, and we do also act for clients in the CICA claims. I'll just finish on this slide to say that it is possible to bring a claim, a civil claim for compensation, and an application under the CICA at the same time. Our advice would just be that if you are successful and awarded an amount from the CICA and then go on to succeed in a claim for compensation in the civil redress, you would be under a duty to inform the CICA of that, as they may see that as double recovery and request that the amount they've awarded be repaid.
So that was a really quick run through of civil compensation claims and even more brief the CICA. We're very happy to answer any specific questions, and I think I can see that some have come through on the Q&A. But if there are any that you want to ask either Rebecca or I directly, do feel free to contact us. Our information is here on this slide, but also all of our contact details are available on our website. So if you just search Burdon Kemp, you'll be able to contact us there too. Let's have Sam and Martyna back, and we can answer a couple of questions that have come through. Hi both.
Hello.
Hi, well done.
So I think we've had a question through on the Q&A. which is about how COVID-19 has broken down geographical barriers to accessing support online, which is great, albeit with the challenges of online meetings. Post-pandemic, what ambitions does Survivors UK have to broaden its services across a greater area? And linked to that, what are the challenges? And then what can supporters such as BBK and Survivors UK do to help achieve those ambitions?
I don't mind speaking about this one, if that's okay. I mean, maybe BBK, you might have a different answer as well, but maybe we can all add to each other's answers. But thank you. I can see that was anonymous attendee, and they said big thanks for everything that BBK do. And I think thank you for coming to this talk as well and asking that question. In terms of ambitions to broaden our services, I think it's a little bit more than that. I don't think that as a service, we want to seem that we are expanding and spreading ourselves so thin that we might not be able to support the massive need that is in London. So I think being able to spread and make more services inclusive for men, boys, non-binary and transgender people, I think that's the way to go. It's about empowering local services, local councils, local government who make more services that actually start speaking about this. A lot of services that I've spoken to in London, or sorry, a lot of boroughs that I've spoken to in London are at the stage of actually making actions about making more male, non-binary and transgender inclusive services, but we need more, especially in more rural areas in England, in the UK, in the world. Sorry, I just moved to answer, there was a second part about this. How do we kind of get there? I think that it's about having these conversations. I think organizations like the Samaritans, we've all heard about them. We've all seen their adverts because they are an incredible charity and they have a lot of awareness around them, because something like mental health is a lot more accessible to speak about right now. It's a lot more interesting for a lot of people to speak about. And if 10 years ago you'd have brought up mental health, people would have probably felt the same as people feel about sexual violence now. It's not a comfortable thing to speak about. And we need to see that same movement, both with the conversation around sexual violence and with support services. We need to create these conversations. We need to ask our people, we need to ask our friends, our colleagues, our families, teachers, doctors, etc., etc. And I think that's something really important today. It's so lovely that so many of you have come out today to listen to us talk about our services. But what do we do with this information afterwards? We need to take this knowledge that we've learned and start spreading this knowledge. We need to start letting people know about these services and about this topic in general. I think the challenges with that are having those conversations. I am not blind to the fact that these are very challenging conversations to have, and they have a lot of emotions around them, both good and bad emotions. And that's really difficult, and it's really difficult to make this a real topic. I've learned from working just in this organization that just by bringing this up and working in it, that your loved ones will speak to you about what might have happened to them and experiences that they might have had. And that is a very difficult chat to have. But knowing that you can be that conduit and you can be that person, that shoulder to refer to specialist services, to say to someone, that is so important. You deserve support. You deserve someone to hear what you have gone through and to hopefully move on from that. That is what we need to do. We need to have more of these conversations. What can supporters such as BBK and Survivors do to help achieve these ambitions? Have more of these chats with you lovely people. It's about selfishly giving us this platform to speak about this. As is the way with this topic, usually people interact with it upon something happening for them to almost be forced to know about this topic. We want to make sure that people are knowing about this more proactively, that this is something that people do want to speak about, they do want to campaign for, they do want to know more about. But yeah, that's my answer. I'm not sure if anyone else had anything to add, but thank you very much for that question. It was lovely.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you've just said, Sam. And I think kind of half the battle with challenging societal stereotypes is just having those initial conversations. And like you say, that's already a really good start if we've got people coming here to talk about it, but also just thinking about your presentation and the number of different organisations that you've been out to speak to on behalf of Survivors UK since you've been with the organisation is just incredible, because every single time that you go out to talk to those people, you just really are reaching out to help people understand more and to break down those barriers and those stereotypes, which I just think is fantastic.
Thank you.
Don't know if anyone wanted to add anything there. We've got a couple of extra questions that have come through. One of them is specifically for Martyna. Is there anyone working on an online training for those who may receive a report of abuse? Some police officers taking early reports of abuse ask quite inappropriate questions, and an online training as part of the recruitment process would be cheap, but also a really effective way of helping to raise consciousness and professional competence of the police. I don't know if you know anything about that, Martyna.
It is a little bit tricky because it's not up to us to train the police officers. Police officers are given the specific training within the force to then be dealing with certain type of cases. And unfortunately, I agree, this can be the case that some police officers, even with specific training, they don't have the bigger understanding of the challenges that survivors are facing when coming forward, and they might not understand you know, the impact of trauma on the brain and the reactions of the survivors. And I know it's very, I know this is so unfair on survivors when they have to speak to the police and they get these type of responses. What I can say is that, you know, if you want an ISVA support in raising that with the police, perhaps with the supervisors, we will help you do that if that's what you want to do. You know, because this is the only way we're going to bring change in police officers responding appropriately to survivors coming forward. If we're going to raise these issues and say this is not okay, this survivor should not have met with that response. So this is all I can say. Unfortunately, we don't have the influence on what training they receive, but we can challenge these. Yeah.
That's really helpful, Martyna. Thank you. Rebecca, I wonder if you have anything to add to that, because I know you've done some work with Operation Hydrant in the past. I think they've worked on trying to do some kind of national coordination of that type of thing.
Yeah, we've sort of had a relationship with Operation Hydrant for a number of years. So we are sort of in touch and feeding back feedback that we get from individual clients to the police force. And of course, Operation Hydrant is the operation that sort of coordinates all of the child abuse investigations in the country. So, you know, that's absolutely another way that if we get feedback from some of our clients, you know, I've done it myself on a number of occasions. When a client has had a difficulty with a particular police force, I've just cut through all of that and just gone straight to Operation Hydrant for advice. So it's absolutely something that we can do. Yeah.
Thanks. We've got another question which I think might stick with you, Rebecca, which is about the 3-year time limit on civil claims, and the person that's messaged us has said that they're really shocked, which is certainly something that I hear from a lot of clients. And I guess perhaps it links in with Martyna's work as well. So just about if it takes you a really long time to come forward, you've only done so recently, but then you're kind of stuck in the police process, and what you can do to try to speed that up, kind of what next steps you can take, whether that's with the police or a civil claim with the 3-year time limit, I guess.
So I think just picking up on what you briefly explained, Emily, so there is this strict 3 years deadline, so until your 21st birthday if it happened to you as a child, but the courts do understand that it is extremely difficult for survivors to come forward, and the majority of our clients are, you know, sometimes decades out of time for understandable reasons. So the court does have that discretion, but it would be for each individual claimant to argue that to the court as to why the claim should be allowed out of time. But, you know, in our eyes, it doesn't really need much of an explanation. It's clear that the majority of people just aren't able to come forward within that time limit. So as I said, whilst technically speaking, the majority of our claims are out of time, we are still successful in them because we will be arguing that it would be completely unequitable and unreasonable to allow our clients to be denied access to justice all those years later.
And I guess just picking up on the second part there, Martyna, is there anything that people can do to speed the police up?
Again, this is something that ISVAs can help with. You know, let us know if you are not receiving updates or if there's certain delays, and we can speak to the officer in charge of the case. We'll try and be that bridge and find out why the delays are happening, explain, you know, why the police cannot move things forward, and if there is an error on police side, of the police officer's side, we can escalate that with the sergeants, with the supervisor. And if the survivor you know, wish to make a complaint, then we'll also, if that's what they want to do, we'll support them in doing that, and hopefully we'll do it that way. In terms of obviously we're talking about compensation claims, and also within when we talked about SICA, Rebecca was talking about SICA claims. The time limit is either from 2 years from it's happening, 2 years from becoming an adult, or 2 years from reporting. Now we know that actually criminal justice cases in regards to sexual violence can take longer than 2 years. So what we try and say is that we can apply for SICA compensation before the criminal justice process has ended, or if someone is not comfortable with that, we have spoke to SICA and said, you know, if they were advised, please wait until the criminal justice process has ended. SICA will accept that with our letter of support explaining we worked with the survivor, they were asked to wait until the criminal justice process has ended. Unfortunately, what it meant, it went over 2 years, but that's what they're asked to do. We're coming forward now as soon as we could.
And that's where that exceptional circumstances comes in. It's completely reasonable.
Thanks, that's really helpful, both. We've got a query through here. So is the fact that there's something of a taboo about male sexual abuse a barrier to getting support, financial and pro bono? And I think that's in relation to Survivors UK as an organisation rather than kind of individuals. So whether it's hard for Survivors UK to get the support that it needs to support its clients because of the content.
I don't mind answering a little bit about this. I think you've answered your own question there. It's true. It is that silence, that taboo creates a silence around this topic, and that silence creates a lack of awareness. Lack of awareness creates lack of research. The lack of research, lack of conversation, then media portrayals of male rape and sexual abuse jokes, etc. And it creates this cycle, and no one's really, well, 5 years ago, no one was really breaking that cycle. And now we are starting to unpack that. We are starting to create this language around the topic, because if we didn't have that language, it's become this sort of narrative that we as a society are expecting survivors of all genders to shout louder. And it's actually more ownership on society to listen more to these organizations, to these survivors who are in need of support. And as more people are recognized by society as survivors of sexual abuse, rape, sexual assault, and all forms of sexual violence, then we can start pouring more funding into charities that can support these people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Did anyone want to add anything to that?
What's on?
Fully covered, Sam. There's another question about what kind of evidence do you need for a criminal court if the incident happened a long time ago, maybe a couple of decades?
So I'll answer. It's very difficult for an ISVA service to answer that question, because it isn't our role to gather evidence or advise people what sort of evidence is needed. This would be up to the police to take statements, and following the statements have a line of inquiry as to who they need to go and speak to, what sort of evidence they're going to be looking at. It's actually very rarely with sexual offences that there will be CCTV recording witnesses. So this isn't it. If there is, great, but what police will be looking at is speaking to people who may know about it, who may know about certain situation, maybe not witness directly, but have a knowledge of the circumstances and so on, maybe saw the survivor, you know, right after the incident, right after the abuse. Maybe the survivor has spoken to that person and told that person about what happened, and so on. It's very difficult to comment what sort of evidence will actually bring a case to court. It really depends on each individual case. You know, just to give you an example, I have worked on a case where the abuse happened in the 70s, and the case went to court 3 years ago. So there wasn't any physical evidence. It was all based on statements and medical records and so on. But then at the same time, you can have a sexual violence incident happen a week ago, reported to the police, and that case, even though it happened a week ago, unfortunately may not get to court because the police were not able to gather the evidence that could get this case to court. So it's very much depending on each case. And just because it happened many years ago, it doesn't mean automatically that there is no chance of it going any further. So I hope this answered the question.
Yeah, I think it did, and hopefully the person can come back to us if they had any further queries about it. We've had a question about someone who was abused in the UK but no longer lives here, and just about the support that Survivors UK may be able to offer them. Sam, I don't know if that's one that you could pick up.
Yeah, sure. I might have to keep it short, because unfortunately I wish that we were able to support internationally. I think it's a really hard thing to say that just because of the resources, the very limited resources that we currently have, we aren't able to expand outside of London, let alone outside of the UK, as much as we would love to do that. But kind of sort of in reflection to one of the previous questions, the more we do speak about this, and the more conversations we have about this, hopefully the more funding we can get, and hopefully the more services we are able to, and in doing so, these conversations will also hopefully spark more international conversation around how people are just not being seen, not being heard, and not being supported enough. But I am very sorry, and I understand how difficult that answer can be to hear, that we aren't able to host those national groups. But I would never say never, and hopefully one day we can move in these services.
Mm-hmm. If I can just add on top of that.
My internet might have just...
If I can just add as well, in terms of the ISVA service, if someone wants help in reporting to Metropolitan Police because the abuse happened in London, we can do that remotely, even if people are abroad. So we can support that because the abuse happened in London, and that survivor would need support around the criminal justice process. That's to do with London Metropolitan Police. In that case, we would be able to support a survivor, and obviously people can still access the online chat, I guess. Is that right, Sam? Yeah. So but if someone is abroad and the abuse happened abroad, then unfortunately ISVA service wouldn't be able to help with that side of things.
I'm really conscious of time and that we probably do need to start wrapping up, but I think this might be a really good question to leave the webinar on, which is one that we've had through about what people can do to help support Survivors UK, whether that's financially or otherwise.
Sorry, my computer's making noises. Would anyone else like to go? Or I wonder if this would be nice if we all sort of said a comment to sort of wrap it up, because I've answered. I don't want to keep bulldozing through, and my internet's unstable, which isn't helpful at this time. Would anyone else like to go first?
I can maybe go first. I think in any way survivors feel that they're able to support us, whether that is taking part in other service user channels and panels, letting us know, you know, what works well, what maybe we could improve on and expand upon. We would like to take all that feedback, and if there is anything else, you know, we might think that actually as a service user, could you support us through that? We would then be happy to reach out if we know that these individuals do want us to reach out to ask for that support for the charity.
I guess from my perspective, with a dual hat on as a solicitor working with victims of abuse, but also a trustee of Survivors UK, I think the biggest thing that most people can do is talk about it, which goes back to what Sam was saying earlier. And I think having those conversations, you know, with your family members, with your friends, you know, talking about the impact that abuse does have on victims, I think that's a really, really important thing, but also something that everyone can be part of, and really just helping to do that, you know, awareness raising, and like Survivors, part of one of Survivors UK's campaigns, you know, we see you. Just having that conversation with other people, you know, you don't know who's been a victim, and you don't know who, because you've been open about knowing that it is a problem for men and boys, who will feel empowered to be able to talk about what's happened to them. And I think the more that we can do that as a society and as individuals, the more people will have confidence to talk about what's happened to them.
I'm not sure I can add much more to that, Emily. That was perfect answer. Just to say that, yeah, it's about raising awareness. And as far as BBK is concerned, any support that we can give you guys, we're there. It's a fantastic organisation, and you know, hopefully we'll do some more of these talks in the future as well.
I don't know if Sam's internet's gone such that we can't get a final word from him.
Am I back now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh no. Oh, okay. There's a slight lag. I guess on the larger scale, it's about holding people and authorities and organisations accountable. If you feel able to say where you feel that you have been, where there are shortcomings and where you might have felt wronged, but make people aware that these pitfalls are there, because if you have experienced that sort of pitfall in that organisation, someone else might have or might do as well. And maybe I'm hopeful, but I think that is all rooted in ignorance, and they need to learn, that there is room for growth, and that can come from making mistakes. And I think it's okay to hold people accountable for those mistakes.
I think that's an absolutely perfect note to end the webinar on. Thanks so much, Sam and Martyna. That was really informative and just so great to hear about all of the things that Survivors UK can do to help. And thanks so much to all of our attendees for coming along and for taking the time to listen to Survivors UK and BBK about what we do and how we try to help. I have put in the chat our email addresses. If there is anything, and Sam and Martyna are happy with this as well, I have checked in advance. If there's any questions at all that you have that you want to speak to us about directly, please do feel free to get in touch. But all that remains is for me to say thanks so much, everyone, for your time. And we hope to see you at another webinar soon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Rebecca and Emily, for setting this up as well, and to all of you at BBK.
Not at all. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.